answered the call and obeyed God's command. He sent you here, we know you're in His hand. Your message from the Word touches our very soul. We've seen your faithfulness and we want you to know. Pastor, we love you. We appreciate all you do. And God sees the sacrifice you've made for Jesus Christ. You pray for the lost, and God leads them to the cross. And we know one day you'll hear your Father say, my child, well done. My child, well done. In the still quiet place, on your knees in prayer, God sees your tears, hears the burdens you bear. The Lord's by your side, blesses all that you do. Through the good and bad times, He'll see you through. Pastor, we love you. We appreciate all you do. And God sees the sacrifice you've made for Jesus Christ. You pray for the lost, and God leads them to the cross. And we know one day you'll hear your Father say, my child, well done. My child, well done. Pastor, we love you. We appreciate all you do. And God sees the sacrifice you've made for Jesus Christ. You pray for the lost, and God leads them to the cross. And we know one day you'll hear your Father say, my child, well done. My child, well done. Oh, my child, well done. My child, well done.
It's on.
Well, I said good morning to you earlier, and now I say to you good afternoon. It's wonderful that all of you have stayed and joined in our lunch together. We have particular people saying a word about each particular pastor, and I thought we'd go ahead and get started so that we might all go home and have a nice Sunday afternoon nap. Oh, I don't need it. Oh, wait, yes, I do. So let me just say that the people who are speaking today could have spoken about any of the pastors. Some of them said to me, well, how can I just speak about one? I want to speak about so many. So don't feel like that if somebody speaks about you pastors, don't feel bad if someone speaks to another one besides you. They would have liked to have spoken about you too. But you see, I have limited people to speak only about one pastor. I'm thinking about all of our time schedule, right? So that's what's happening today. One person will come forward and speak about each particular pastor. And the question that they're going to answer is very similar to what pastors spoke about at worship today, namely, in what way was the light of Christ made visible through this particular pastor. And so we are going to start at the very beginning this afternoon. And so I invite Bill Pappin, who's right behind me, to come and speak a word about how the light of Christ was made visible through Dick Matheson.
Back in the 50s, I hate to admit that I was alive back then, but I was. And our family went to a different church, and privately, none of us liked the church. We were kind of afraid that, can you hear this? Privately, we weren't too crazy about going to this church. Matter of fact, I would do anything to avoid going to Sunday school, including probably breaking a commandment or two, I'm guessing. So a friend of ours suggested that we come up here. And the church, there was no building here at that time. The building was up on, there was an old schoolhouse up on the hill, 33rd and Silver Lake Road, and Dick was the pastor. And one of the reasons the other church was such a problem is it made us feel like we were not worthy somehow. We were always going to do bad things and end up going nowhere and all that kind of stuff. We came here, and within a couple of years, it was confirmation time, and lo and behold, the teacher was Dick. And it was a bunch of 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. The first thing we had a problem with, how do we address this guy? What do we call him? I never even really knew a pastor. And Mr. didn't seem right, Reverend seemed a little heavy. He said, call me Brother Dick. That's what he wanted us to call him. Here's a 13-year-old smart-aleck little kid calling a pastor Brother Dick. And he had a method of teaching that I still think about it today. He had us draw a tree, and the tree was Abraham. And off the branch of Abraham came Christianity, and then the Catholic Church, Martin Luther, and it took a little while. Way up here somewhere, John Wesley finally did show up. And that is where the light came to me. I didn't really realize it at 13. But the difference between the church we were at and the one that Dick led here was he'd even like to hang around us kids. I mean, it's a stunner, particularly the way we were. And he was so patient with us, and he taught us that we were acceptable. And I didn't realize what that meant theologically at the time. I do now, and I thank God every day that Dick Matheson got me started, and I'm really here because of Dick. And thank you.
Great to hear stories like that. Ken and Darlene Punchakar, are both of you going to speak about Gordon Meinhardt? Oh, okay. Very good.
We were active in this church when Gordon and Sarah Jane were here. And Gordon's sermons were always so meaningful and so deliberate. And he's the only pastor I knew that would pace back and forth from one side of the sanctuary to the other while he was giving his sermon, and sometimes even down the aisle. He was a pacer, and he could give a sermon at the same time. That was so meaningful. But I do have a little joke to tell about him. One time during his sermon, he used a swear word. And Ed Osberg's mother popped out of the congregation and stormed out of the sanctuary. Am I right, Gordon?
You're right.
And I don't know if she ever came back or not, but I know all the Osbergs have come back. So those are my memories of Sarah Jane and Gordon, and we thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is probably not my 1 minute of fame, but I hope so. Anyway, we came back here about 1965, and Gordon was the minister here. And I had traveled with my company at that time. And I was in Washington, D.C., and I ran into a poster store. And I walked into that poster store, and what do I see besides a wanted poster? And who was on that wanted poster? Jesus. And so I looked at it and I said, and by the way, he was not dressed very well and he didn't have blue eyes. Anyway, I said, I know where I have to take this. And I bought it. And I brought it back here and I gave it to Gordon. And Gordon looked at it and he says, I don't think I can hang that on my wall where people can see it. But he says, I'll put it on the back of my door. And that's where it hung, I believe, and I'm sure Gordon still has it. Isn't that right, Gordon? True. But that's what I remember about him, and it was a wanted poster, and it said, wanted for sedition, wanted for criminal trespass, wanted for all sorts of different things that most of us don't think about Jesus. But I think he liked it anyway, and if he still got it, that's wonderful.
Can we hold that, please? We can get back to it. Yes. Okay. All right. Okay. So Glenn Martin is the next pastor that's going to be spoken about in terms of how the light of Christ was visible. Yeah. Deborah Dorn Anderson is going to say a few words.
Just like you, Glenn, to try to take my time. Okay. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. That's what Jesus tells us in Matthew 5:16, and this passage has always spoken to me about Glenn Martin. Glenn was pastor at Faith when I first joined the congregation in 1980, and I was pregnant with my first son, Eric. Light helps us to see things. Well, Glenn brought the light of Jesus to our family, and specifically to Eric, with Eric's baptism. Jesus gives us the light that promotes growth and life and provides the truth about our destiny. Well, Glenn promised to be with us as we guided Eric through his growth in the church. Glenn made a connection with Eric that lasts still today. Even as Glenn was reassigned and left Faith, he left Eric with the gift of love and watchfulness. We were fortunate that when Glenn retired, he chose to return to Faith. That was just about the time Eric was in junior high and preparing for confirmation. Glenn was the one person that Eric wanted to be his mentor for his faith statement. I can't thank Glenn enough for the time and energy he put into Eric at that time. Light brings comfort and warmth. For a confirmation present, Glenn gave Eric a copy of his favorite picture, Jesus on the Road to Emmaus. Do you remember that? No, you gave him a copy. He still has it. No, it's good. Eric has told me many times that when he looks at it, and he still has it, that it reminds him of how much Glenn has meant to him in his life with the church. I don't know many people who've been so fortunate to have a pastor play a continuing role in life events. We were pleased to have Glenn in attendance at Eric's graduation and wedding as well. When I asked Eric this week what he would say to Glenn right now, he said it would be to thank him for being with him during the most important church events of his life: baptism, confirmation, and wedding. He was wondering if you could possibly hang out and maybe do his funeral. Maybe? He wanted to know if you could possibly hang around and do his funeral. Of course, yes. Pastors are immortal. So, Eric has remained a good churchgoer. He and his wife Jess are bringing their children up in the church. And I have you, Glenn, to thank you for being the light unto his feet. Bless you.
pastor at Faith was Howard Kruger, and Jim Hoska is here to say a word about how the light of Christ was experienced through Howard.
Good afternoon. You do better than that, okay? Okay. I joined the church in 1983 with Reverend Kruger. Helped me with that. And the one thing that, well, actually I can speak about all the pastors. Glenn Martin, you married us, and I'll never forget what you said to us after the wedding. After you pronounced our vows and we kissed, you said, well, you can do better than that. You made us redo it. But Reverend Kruger came to our house, and we lived in Minneapolis at the time. We had a miniature schnauzer named Hans. And he was the most persistent little character, 22-pound character you'd ever want to meet. And this is where I really saw the light of Christ and how Christ would have handled a persistent pet or persistent child. Hans came there and was, of course, Reverend Kruger had his hand on the arm of the chair, and Hans was up there scratching him. Come on, scratch me, scratch me. Well, finally Reverend Kruger put his hand down, and Hans sat down next to him, and he just put his hand on his head, and that was all it took. And the dog never did that to anybody, even me, and I was his master. So Reverend Kruger, you know, that's where I saw it, was through a miniature schnauzer. Because that's how Christ would have handled something like that.
Let me test the will of the body. We have a couple of options. We could just keep going straight through this list, or we could take a little break and eat and talk and then come back and do some more. How many would like to keep going? Keep going. How many would like to take a break and come back to it? We have some of both, but more for keeping going. So for the time being, we'll be keeping going. This body may have a different opinion. After a few more people talk, you might want a break, so we'll test you again. But for now, we'll keep going. So the next pastor was Dave Schneider. And Terry Krinke will come and say a few words about Dave and how the light of Christ was visible through him. And while he's coming up here, how about if we give a round of applause to those who have facilitated this dinner by working hard in the kitchen today. Carol Vick headed that up, and she was not afraid to call upon help from others, and so we're very grateful for the work in the kitchen. Terry.
Thank you, Pastor Diane. I know that part. And I asked her how much time, and she said, oh, 1 to 2 minutes. You give me a microphone. That's a challenge I'm not sure I can handle, but I will give it a shot. First of all, I would like to say, on behalf of the lay members of the congregation, thank you to all of the people that are here today, took time out from their busy schedules or their other churches to be with us to celebrate, because this is a big deal for this church, and you made it a big deal for us. Thank you very much. I think pastors typically are thought of being able to spread the light of Christ with their worship services. Now, some succeed more than others, and I don't think that's an exaggeration. But one of the noteworthy events in
Pastor Schneider's week was Sunday morning worship. And if we weren't able to see the light of Christ and what we could do to spread that around to everyone by listening to him, we weren't listening, because Dave's spiritual nature came through loud and clear in his sermons. And I think it was really funny when Lent came around and we got to Easter. It was like Dave had never had an Easter before. He'd be there so excited and be jumping around and shouting, "Christ is risen," and we all had to get excited about that event, as we rightly should. As Christians, Christ being risen is what it's all about. Dave, we thank you for that. You taught us to be happy, especially on Easter, and what our mission was all the days of the year after Easter. And there was a couple of other things Dave did. I missed the 2 minutes, sorry, Diane. Dave started the Disciple Bible study series, and he had all 3 of them in our congregation. And I found myself, I couldn't believe it, but I was sitting in my hotel room on business trips, taking my daily chapters that I had to read for the Bible study. It was just unreal. I knew he was going to chastise me when I got back if I didn't have it done. So. And there was one other thing, where he would lead men's retreats for all of us. And I can remember a couple of times, we sang "Catch the Light" this morning at the end of the service, which we've been singing all Lent season long. Dave could help us catch the light in dried leaves and broken twigs. He'd hold them up during communion and tell how that was part of the doing of Christ in this world that we so dearly love. And up to this point, we've been brutalizing it pretty bad. But thanks again, Dave. You were really and truly a light for us.
And the next pastor at Faith was Dennis Alexander. Carol Vance is going to come and say a few words about how the light of Christ was visible through Dennis. And while he's making his way up here, let me say thank you to all of you who brought food today. A potluck never works unless people bring food, right? So you all did great. Give yourselves a hand.
We've had a number of exceptional ministers at this church. Actually, I thought Dennis had been the longest, but we had one even the same amount of time. Gordon, 16 years for each. There are a number of things one could say about Dennis, but as I look around this room, I look at the diversity in it. The diversity among each and every one of you. Dennis was before his time in talking about diversity at this church. He brought us to a place that probably many of us could never think of. A reconciling church. He made us appreciate, or he gave us an appreciation for not only religious diversity, but ethnic diversity, sexual choice diversity. And for me personally, I came out of a really, really conservative background. And it's always been hard for me to accept diversity. But our ministers have led the way in doing that. And Dennis did an exceptional job. Another thing about Dennis that I really appreciated was the fact that you couldn't go to a funeral or a wedding without coming away saying, I know those people. I know those people. He did such a wonderful job in talking about the families, talking about the person, that you really felt like you knew that person or that family. We were very fortunate to have all of these ministers, and oh, I forgot the narthex. Wasn't that in Dennis's term, the narthex? We used to come down here, you know, for coffee. Can any of you imagine now coming down here for coffee rather than up in the narthex? Thanks to Dennis, it happened.
Next was Emma Feline. And Emma, are you here? Where are you? There she is. Yay, we're glad to welcome you to lunch and so forth today. And we shared your beautiful statement about how you saw the light of Christ in this congregation during worship this morning. So we're glad to have you here now for lunch. And the person who is responding to you is not able to be here today, but that person is Fran Cox. And so let me just tell you, Fran was out on a wonderful adventure at St. Croix State Park and had a fall. And so she is injured enough that she's not able to be here today, and she was so sorry not to be here. But she told me what she wanted to say about you, Emma, so I wrote it down, and I'm going to repeat her words. Because she was quite excited to speak about how she saw the light of Christ through your ministry and the person that you are. Fran talked about your courage, your faith, and your patience. She saw you have the courage to step out of the box as a single woman, to go across the ocean, travel across the ocean to receive a child. All the while having the faith that this could happen and the patience to wait for it to happen. She saw these same traits exemplified when you worked with the children in the Sunday school here at Faith. Courage, faith, and patience were traits that you exemplified in many settings. Fran loves you dearly and is sorry that she could not say these words herself, but she sends them from her heart to speak about what a light you have been in her life and in the life of the church here at Faith. So thank you. Okay, folks, shall we keep going or shall we take a break?
Keep going.
Keep going. Very good. The next ordained person who was appointed here was Paula Colton, and Kent Reed is going to come and speak about how the light of Christ was evident through Paula.
Awesome. It's great to see everybody back. You know, we first came, or I could say I first came to Faith Church in the early 70s when my mother brought essentially her young family here after her divorce. And Gordon was the pastor here. Then obviously we moved away, or grew up and came back. When I returned to the Twin Cities in '98 with a young family, this is where we came. I was chair of the pastor parish committee when during the last 2 years Dennis was here, and one of the things that we had the joy of doing was bringing Paula on board. The conversations I've had with my kids, who essentially were active in we really had an exploding senior high youth program here at that time. And Paula did some really amazing things. In talking with my daughters about their experiences with Paula, is that Paula was a yes person. Whatever the youth wanted to do, she was up for. What they remember most, I think, are the trips to Jummies, Ummies, those sort of things, car washes, lock-ins, all these kind of things. A wonderful Wednesday youth program, and that the impact that had on the kids, and especially my young daughters. I think the other thing that I appreciate about Paula is that you saw today when you walked up to her, her infectious smile, and that she brought with her a strength of what young women were about. She came here essentially starting out in a budding career as a young woman, became a young mother, and I think that influence and that example that she provided to my kids at least, and I think the rest of the youth here was really amazing. Thank you, Paul.
And then Kevin Schill was appointed here, and Kevin, we thank you for that heartwarming statement that you sent that we read at worship today about how you saw the light of Christ visible in this congregation. And Kay Kramer is going to come and speak about how she witnessed the light of Christ through your ministry.
Well, as you heard in Kevin's statement, he wasn't really with us for very long, but I don't think he realizes some of the impact that even a short time can have. Because when Kevin was here just about a year, our daughter, who was in the Peace Corps, called us about 2 months before she was coming home, and she said, well, I'm going to be home, and I'm bringing my novio, and he'll be here, and we have to get married in 3 months. Well, to say that Dan and I were a little shocked would be an understatement. To say that we didn't know what the heck we were doing would be another. We didn't even know her novio, but Kevin was there, but I didn't know. I thought, well, maybe, what is she talking about? Are we going to have a justices of the peace in the backyard and dinner at Taco Bell? What is this? But when she got home, she said, I want to be married in my church. I want to be married in the church I grew up in. And so she called Kevin, and he immediately set a date with her. And when Oscar came home, a few months later, he came here, Kevin embraced them. He gathered them over to his place, and he counseled them, and he helped them plan a ceremony. He called the pastor of Park Avenue, who was a native Spanish speaker. He embraced our Paraguayan harpist, who gave us this beautiful music, and he helped us have a service that combined this culture, our culture and our Methodist tradition, with this culture in South America of Paraguay in this little Catholic church in Jetu, Paraguay. And together we came together under one God, and we all realized we were worshiping the same God. And especially, he gave this gift to Oscar's mother, because she came here and she did not speak English. She'd never been to the United States, and she'd never set foot in any church but a Catholic church. And so when she came to this service, this wedding of her dear son, she saw that Christ wasn't on the cross in the front, and maybe Mary wasn't over here in the corner. But underneath it all, we were talking about the same God and the same Christ. And Kevin gave us that, and he gave it to our family. And we have carried it through for 10 wonderful years as part of this other family in Paraguay. We are one as Christians, and he taught us that. And I have carried this with me because I especially think in this day and age when all we do is look at the differences in us and the differences in our religion and the differences in our culture, Kevin gave to us one God, one Christ. No matter how diverse we are, we're the same underneath. And we thank you for that. Our family thanks you for that, Kevin.
And after that, Lee Brown was appointed to this church, and Carolyn Busacker is going to come and say a word about how the light of Christ was visible through Lee.
Hi, Lee. So, how have I seen the God's love shine through during Lee's time here? You know, I can teach kids all the livelong day, but I get very nervous in front of grown-ups. When I think of my experiences with Lee, I think of two things mainly besides her always having a smile on her face, and how it was fun to hang out with Lee and go and have coffee, and how she had tattoos, yay, and she actually let them be seen. All pastors should, absolutely. And how she was okay with being just a little irreverent in the house of the Lord once in a while. I loved all of those things about, yes, you did. All of those things about being with Lee. But the first thing that I think about with Lee is that she was a very non-judgmental ear for kids during confirmation time or just if they had any questions. And my children have always been questioners. And all of them, and in particular David. And David always took religion very seriously, and he had a lot of questions for Lee, and she always had time for him. She was willing to meet him for coffee and conversations, and she met with me too, as we had a lot of the same questions, me and David. She gave her views when David started talking about converting to Catholicism. She was never judgmental. She gave her views, but she listened, listened to the questions. She never tried to talk him out of converting to Catholicism. She just was willing to listen to him give his views. And then she came and sat with our family during the confirmation. Is that what it was called? The confirmation the night before? I'm still new to some of the terms. The Easter Vigil, exactly, came and sat with our family when he converted to Catholicism. And she always joked that there weren't a lot of people on this world that she loved enough to not only meet for coffee and conversation at 8 a.m. on the university campus, but also go to a 3-hour Easter Vigil the night before she had her own gig, her own church things to do. The other thing that I think of as a young man who was a friend of David and Adam's in high school, who was struggling with his sexuality. And I told him that I knew someone who I was sure would listen to him and talk with him and not be judgmental. He had expressed that he was not out to anyone really, except a couple people. And he thought that he was going to get a lot of rejection from people. He thought that his parents would disown him, and he fervently did not want to be gay. And I said, well, come some Sunday about noon, and I think I know someone that you can talk to. And I asked Lee to talk with our young friend, and she had no idea what he was coming to talk about. She looked at me a little bit, and I said, just go on in. Just go on in and have a seat. And she did such a great job with that boy. And I sat in there for a little while with them, just to give him a little bit of encouragement, kind of a mom thing to do. And but then I asked him if it was okay if I left, and he said sure, and they talked for a long time. And I think that was the only time that he came to see Lee. I called her later, but it meant a lot to him to just be able to talk to another person about God and how God was reacting to his questioning his sexuality. And she just did such a wonderful job, and I called her later and told her what a great job she did. And I definitely saw the light of God shine through her then. Thanks, Lee.
And then Susan Mullen was to the staff, and Janet Johnson is going to tell us a word about Susan and the light of Christ. And Susan, of course, today, so I really get free reign here. Susan, I mean, I feel like I could talk to about everybody and for everybody. Everyone's so dear and precious to me here. Susan actually first came to the church because of her son, came to Faith Church because of her son, who had been on ASP trips and really enjoyed the youth here. So Gary and Mark got Ben here, which then brought Susan here and her family as she was here. And during Susan's tenure, she was wrestling with her soul as she decided she didn't want to go through the take just one class at seminary, and then it was another class and another class, And so as the time went forward, she became a deacon and is here at the church now and the director of faith formation. Is that now? There's so many new terms every time somebody comes in. That's kind of hard. Susan is at the march in Washington, D.C. now about climate. And the sign that she had, if any of you saw on Facebook, she has a sign that says, "The earth does not belong to us." And I think the one thing that she brings as a light here, I like to think of Jesus often had some stories and parables that kind of made us wrestle with our own souls. And through that wrestling, kind of seeing a light. And Susan, the earth is her ministry, I guess I would like to say. She started the Eco Kids Camp, seeing that there was a need and maybe not as many people coming to regular church camp. If we talk about the love of the earth and how we can do things to maintain, reuse, recycle, all of that. And this Eco Kids Camp is now in its 4th year, I think, 4th or 5th. And it's full of young children and the volunteers and the people who are working with them, getting to know about the community, the earth, what we can do to take care of God's green earth. She is smart, she is thoughtful, she goes from that, she has thought, you know what, Faith Church needs to reduce our carbon footprint. And so she was instrumental in bringing LED lighting, which is beautiful lighting, into the sanctuary, working on perhaps some more solar things. Anything earth-friendly is coming to us. And another thing with the race relations, the anti-racism workshop that she had, and as we deal with that very timely thing that in the faith community and in St. Anthony, and as we wrestle with our hearts in all of these things, she brings the light of Christ out with the things taking care of the earth, because it does not belong to any of us, but belongs to all of us for us to live and be here for future generations. So we are blessed to have Susan with her ministry and her presence with us here in Faith. When we were first talking about this Sunday, we were talking about just former pastors, but then it was said that, well, we really want to hear from Susan and Diane as well, and we want to talk about you as well. So I guess it's going to happen. I think it's Peg Cooper who's going to come and say a word about my ministry. So Peg, welcome, and we will hear what you have to say. While she's coming up, I would invite all the former pastors and their families to meet right up here afterwards. We'd like to get a picture of everybody together. So if we could meet right up here on this wall, then I think that'll be a good backdrop for a picture.
Pastor Diane, the light you have brought to me and all of us at Faith is a light that is bathed with God's presence. Your leadership at Faith brings about a sense of true grace, peace, spirituality, and calmness, which absolutely radiates from you. In life's tough moments, you are with us, as you have been with me and my family. Your presence and words of prayer remind us that we are loved and God has a plan. I truly appreciate you. You are approachable and always ready and willing to listen, to hear our pain and our joys. Your sermons and words of advice and encouragement warm my heart. You recently led a group to Israel. Sue Sadler was on that pilgrimage with you and was so very appreciative of the enriched experience you provided to the group. And you also brought that pilgrimage back to us here at Faith. You have truly been a blessing to all of us at Faith. The cabinet may think that they appointed you Faith, but I say God truly had a presence sending you to us. God bless you as you continue to spread and share the light of God to all of us. Blessings to you all.
Well, all I can say is continued merriment, folks. Talk, enjoy, and as soon as all of us pastors and families get gathered up here, we'll have a picture. So thank you all for being here today. It's been a wonderful experience.